This soccer war. I mean, it sounds like something you'd read in a satirical newspaper, doesn't it? It's an almost absurd name for a conflict. But, behind that name was a very real and actually incredibly brutal war.
It's the first question that pops into your head, right? How on earth could a simple game of soccer escalate into an armed conflict between two countries? It seems impossible. But that's exactly what we're going to break down here.
So, let's set the scene. The year is 1969. The stakes could not be higher. We're talking about a spot in the World Cup. The passion was just boiling over, and this series of matches became the stage for a drama that was way, way bigger than just sports.
Okay, so let's start with the story that everybody knows, right? The one that gave this whole conflict its famous, or maybe infamous, name.
And you can see why it's such a tempting story. I mean, you can just picture it, can't you? The stadiums are absolutely packed, flags are waving everywhere, and every single goal feels like it's life or death for national pride. The atmosphere was just electric, totally charged with tension.
But this is where we have to pump the brakes a little and ask the big question. Was it really all about a soccer game? Or was there something much, much deeper? Something way older, bubbling under the surface?
And that right there, that brings us to the real heart of the matter. We're talking about the tinder that was just sitting there, bone dry, waiting for a spark. All those deep-seated problems just simmering away.
What you're seeing here really breaks it down perfectly. You've got two completely different stories. On the one hand, you have the surface-level stuff, goals, crazy crowds, flags. But the real story, the one that actually explains what happened, that's all about simmering land disputes, decades of migration, and just this deep, deep resentment.
And look, this wasn't something that happened overnight. We're talking for decades people from a more crowded, poorer country had been moving across the border. And they weren't trying to cause trouble. They were just looking for the basics. Land to farm, a job, a better shot for their kids.
But as you can probably guess, over time, that started to build up resentment. The newcomers, well, they became an easy target. They got blamed for taking land, for taking jobs. The tension just kept growing and growing until new land reform laws suddenly put these families in a really tough spot, threatening everything they had built.
And here's where we see a pattern that's unfortunately all too familiar. Instead of trying to calm things down, you had political leaders and the media, and they just threw gasoline on the fire. They used really inflammatory language, they stoked fear, and they turned people's very real economic worries into this powerful, ugly, nationalist anger.
So now you can start to see how all the pieces connect, right? You've got all this tension, all this dry tinder just lying around, and those soccer matches, they became the perfect spark to set the whole thing ablaze. And check out how quickly this all spiraled out of control. It starts with the heated matches, which lead to riots. Then the media jumps in and just pours fuel on the fire, amplifying all the outrage. Next thing you know, migrants are being expelled, which gives the politicians the excuse they need to mobilize the military. And boom, in just a matter of weeks, it goes from a soccer game to all-out war.
Now, the crazy thing is, the war itself was shockingly short. We're talking just about 100 hours. But don't let that fool you. Just because it was brief doesn't make the brutality or the human cost any less devastating.
I mean, this was basically a modern war, just in miniature. You had airstrikes, you had vicious fighting on the ground along the border, and a ton of damage to infrastructure. But as is always the case, it was the civilians, the regular people, who really paid the highest price.
And the numbers, they're just staggering. Get this, in a matter of days, more than 100,000 people were displaced, forced to just run from their homes, leaving literally everything they owned behind. A massive humanitarian crisis, created in the blink of an eye.
So what's the takeaway from all this? What can we learn from this really tragic chapter in history? Well, it's a powerful case study, and honestly, the lessons here feel more relevant today than ever before.
Okay, so here's the absolute crucial point. If you take away just one thing from this, let it be this. The soccer matches didn't cause the war, they just exposed it. They were the big dramatic stage where all these hidden cracks in the foundation were finally ripped open for everyone to see.
And that's why this whole spark versus tinder idea is so perfect for understanding what happened. The soccer games, that was the spark, a small but very fiery event. But the tinder, the actual fuel for the fire, that was all those issues that had been piling up for years. Land, migration, inequality, you name it.
So this really boils down to three key lessons for us. First, the thing that looks like the cause on the surface, it's often just masking much deeper, systemic problems. Second, massive public events, especially sports, can act like a giant megaphone for nationalism and that whole us versus them mindset. And finally, even a super short conflict, just 100 hours, can leave scars that last for generations.
You know, we all love to think of sports as this great unifier, right? Something that brings us all together, and a lot of the time it is. But what the soccer war shows us is that when you mix sports with really potent ingredients like inequality and political manipulation, it can become a dangerous mirror, one that reflects back the absolute ugliest parts of a society.
At the end of the day, this story is so much more than just a quirky historical anecdote. It's a warning, a really profound one. It's a reminder of just how fragile peace really is, and what can happen when the real, messy, difficult problems are just swept under the rug for too long.